danced here, but I've been obsessed with the Nat for years. The building was all closed up, so when I finally got the key, I walked or crawled over every inch of the place. It was originally a swimming pool, a natatorium built in 1922. They say 6,000 people swam here the first week it was open. 4 years later, J.D. Tucker turned the place into a dance palace. He didn't fill in the swimming pool, he just covered it over with a 10,000 square feet of maple. Some say it was the best dance floor in this part of the country.
The Nat then was called the showplace of the Panhandle. And it was a place where you could take your wife, your mother, your sister, or your daughter and not worry about them.
Oh, Lord, that big. 50 boys out in the middle of that floor. And the girls didn't get out there, but they'd walk over and tag whoever they wanted to dance with. And it was just great.
If I could go back one time and have a dance at the Nat again, it'd be the greatest thing in the world.
We had a wonderful time. And there were friendships made that you would never believe.
Mike and I have been in Amarillo for 14 years, and for 12 of those years, we've been watching the Nat. We've always loved the building. It's one of the most important landmarks left standing in Amarillo. And we wanted to save it and preserve it and give it a new life, and I think we've succeeded.
We really want to continue restoring the Nat, and that means the upstairs, which is a complete ballroom in itself with a hat check room and all of that. Also, to introduce more people to the Nat, more public concerts here, more fundraising projects here, club dances, private functions. So the more we can have special here at the Nat, have people come in, and then they can see Amarillo's landmark.
The Nat was open for business as a dance hall until the 1960s. I think its heyday was in the 1930s, the heart of the Depression. People loved to dance and loved the sound of big band music. At one point, there were 52 people on its staff.
Well, I started working as the hostess in 1935, and I worked 6 years. And it just so happened I was down here going to beauty school, and they had an opening there and asked if I'd like to take the job. And I thought, well, it'd be kind of interesting. And I enjoyed every day of it. I went to work at 8 o'clock in the evening. And incidentally, I had to wear evening gowns all the time, or long formals, which was nice, but I did a lot of sewing. And I don't know, you just kind of felt kind of elegant or something.
Are the memories of the Nat strong for you?
Yes, they are. Because I think some of the best times of my life were spent there.
Amarillo was just a small town, and we had only one high school, and you knew almost everybody in the high school and almost everybody in town. We were Depression children. We were dust storm children. We were used to making our own fun because we had to.
When talking about the 1930s, I once had a student say that his grandparents talked about the 30s being when they were money poor. They had everything except money. And therefore, entertainment and so on that did not require a lot of money was very attractive. And dancing is something that doesn't require a lot of money. You get in, and you're there, and you can spend the evening dancing or something like this.
And we didn't have any money. And that was why the Nat was so popular. You could have a date, go to the Nat for 35 cents. You know, a Coke was a nickel. And at that time in your life, you always double dated or triple dated, because none of us had cars. The family car, and if you got the family car, you were most fortunate.
Every Friday night during the Depression, the owners of the Nat would turn the building over to the teenagers.
On Friday night, on fraternity night or tag night or whatever they called it at that time, it cost 75 cents to get in. You and your date could get in for 75 cents. If you were stag, it was still 75 cents.
Well, my best friend's brother asked me the first time I went, I'll never forget it. It was Doc Ball, and Mary Taylor Ball was his sister. And Mother said that was all right, I could go with him. But it was a fun, fun time. Once you started going to the Nat, your Friday nights were pretty well taken care of. And it is true, if they weren't, you didn't show your face. You hid. You didn't want anybody to know you weren't there.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3.
Going to the Nat on Friday nights, you had a date. Or my sister and I generally could not go unless we had a date. But you'd get out there, and the boys would be on one side, and the girls would be on another, and you'd dance in the middle.
No.
Most of the time you would.
No. The stag line was in the middle.
Oh, that's right.
And you danced around the stag line.
That's right.
And when someone wanted to tag in, why,
yes.
they'd come and tag in, and then they go back to the center.
There was not such a thing as a stag girl going to the Nat. You had a date, and you went in, and no one of the younger generation realized what a stag line was. The boys that didn't have dates, which there were lots of them because they couldn't afford to take a date, or they didn't have a car, they would just get in the center of the floor, and everyone danced around them then, and then they would tag. They would just go up and just touch your arm and tag.
Loewenstern was the band, and poor Loewenstern didn't get to take very many breaks because it it would be jammed full of kids.
You didn't want to be stuck. That was the term that was used, stuck. You didn't want to be dancing all evening with the same boy. And then you would talk about getting a rush on the dance floor, which is 2 or 3 steps with the same boy was just about the end of it.
You could just dance all night long with 15 or 20 different girls, even though you took one girl, and you weren't expected, or it wasn't in those days that you needed to dance with her all night long. You could dance with 20 or 30 girls. And
now, of course, we really felt brave when we tagged in on a little bit older girl or something like that or something. But we had a good time, and it was a good, clean fun.
If we had to dance with one boy very long, we were stuck. And that was terrible. And they say that the boys kind of waved to other boys behind your back to come and get them out of this situation. But hopefully that didn't happen to me too often. I hope it didn't.
Some of the girls from back then say that they've heard that boys would wave at each other if they wanted someone to come tag them.
I would imagine that probably happened.
Now, did you do that?
No.
Did you see it being done?
Yeah, well, I might have. But I could never get that far with a girl going to get rid of her.
You only got to dance with her for how long?
About a half a second, like I said. 2 steps and you were through.
well, there was a bet gotten up that this fella, he said, I bet I can take 2 girls to the Nat, to the same dance, the same night, and neither one of them will know that the other one had a date with me at the same time. So he picked one girl up early, and with the routine at the Nat, you could take a date and maybe not see her for 30 minutes or an hour. You'd be busy dancing, and she'd be busy with her tag dancing and all. Well, he left her and went and got the other girl and brought her to the dance. And then before it was over, why, he took one of the girls home a little bit early and came back and got the other girl and took her home. So he won the bet.
On a Friday night at the Nat, what would be forbidden?
Well, in the first place, any drinking. The kids themselves didn't like it when somebody was drinking. We really kind of policed ourselves.
You just had to be a lady and you had to be a gentleman. Now, the boys a lot of times would go outdoors, and we knew they did, because when they'd come back in and dance with us, we could smell that they'd either drank a beer or part of a beer or had a drink. You could smell it. But the girls now, we never left. Once we went in, we stayed till it's over with.
At that time, we couldn't drink openly, you know. By that, there was bathtub gin and a rot gut, they called it. And if you had anything, or if anybody did have it, they had to leave it in their car, and you would have to go out and get a drink. But sometimes if they went out and had a drink, it might have just practically a sip and thought they were kind of macho if they did it, you know. It was all good, clean fun, and everybody had a good time. 12 o'clock, it was over. And, you know, that was it. And you'd look forward to the next Friday night.
It's very clear our love is here to stay, not for a year, but forever and a day. The radio and the telephone and the movies that we may know may just be passing fancies, and in time may go. But oh my stay. Together we're going a long, long way. In time the Rockies may crumble, Gibraltar may stumble, they're only made of clay. But our love is here too. Our love is here too. Our love is here to stay.
Welcome back, everybody.
We thought it was wonderful music, and I still do think it's wonderful music.
Songs remind me of the guys that I danced with. A particular song, we danced together really good to that one, or, you know, and that's what I remember. And that's why I think I like the 40s music so much better than any other music.
Well, it was 30
30s
40s,
and
yeah.
40s, yeah.
At the time, it was swing, which was the kind of music it was. And that was the dance of the era. Then we went into jitterbug after that, which was wonderful fun. the Nat was a perfect place for all of us. I mean, we could gather there. It was easy. It was easy to get to. It was inexpensive. And we were a real dancing generation anyway.
I think that if you really wanted to be with it, so to speak, you needed to know how to dance. If you didn't dance, you're the old wallflower idea. You're standing over in the corner and you're just not with it.
We danced at school. We danced at our noon hour. If you got back in time, you'd go to the gym and you could dance.
The smooth dancers were the good dancers. It wasn't the jitterbug type. It wasn't that type of dancing. It was true, smooth ballroom dancing.
How did you learn how to dance?
My mother and daddy loved to dance. They danced beautiful together, and they belonged to a lodge in Amarillo. And we didn't have babysitters when we were little. We went with our mother and daddy to wherever they went. And my daddy would always take time to dance with my sister or with me.
I have no recollection of the Nat as a natatorium. It was a dance hall. And I suppose that our parents looked on it as a den of iniquity because we were not allowed to go. It was because if we went there, we had no chaperones. Now, we lived in Clarendon, and there was a wonderful group of boys and girls who started to school together, and we loved the big bands, and we loved the sound of the big bands. And we could go to dances in Clarendon. We could go to the parish hall where the Reverend Mr. and Mrs. Swan chaperoned us. But no such chaperones existed in the Nat. We were on our own. So we couldn't go, and the only way we could go would be to slip off. And we'd all get in the car. We'd tell our parents we were going to spend the night at Marjorie White's. They had a big house with many, many bedrooms upstairs. And we did spend the night with them, but it was later that night when we got home. There was no liquor. We never had any liquor. We never had any beer. We had some Hershey bars and some peanuts. But it was a great time at the Nat, and it was a wonderful, wholesome time, even if we did slip off.
Well, I know that there were certain churches that really frowned on dancing and saw it as, these tend to be the more pietistic churches, and looked upon it as a potentially harmful activity, and not dancing so much in itself, but what it might lead to. And, but I think as then as now, children sometimes disobey their parents, and often, you know, if the parents didn't know about it, fine.
I went to the Presbyterian, and we called it Christian Endeavor. And I believe the Baptists called it the BYPU. And my Methodist friends went to Epworth League. But the popular thing to do after the youth meeting, you already dressed up in your Sunday clothes. So we would pile up in cars, several couples to a car. It was pretty crowded because we didn't have as many cars available to children as are available now. And come to Amarillo to the Nat to dance.
Would your parents or grandparents know that you were not in church but instead at the Nat?
No, they were not aware of that. I don't believe they were aware of that. They might have wondered why it took us so long to get home. They might have.
When people come back to see the Nat, the first thing they look for is the huge mirrored ball that hung in the center of the dance floor.
They had the ball in the middle, and then it was draped back with black something. And
it was all
there.
draped back from that ball with the real dark blue material
had
with stars on it.
Stars.
And the ball was probably...
I imagine 36 inches in diameter. It was a big one.
It was a big one.
It was quite a large thing. It was probably, I'd say 4.5, 5 feet in diameter. Big.
Oh, it was enormous. And it was always on when we were dancing and turning. And it'd sparkle on you. They had a light on it.
That was nice. It made enough light to see, but for some reason, it really was kind of romantic. All these lights circling around the floor and everything. It really was kind of romantic, you know. Mm-hmm.
Everyone remembers that ball. It was huge. It's nothing like the one that's hanging here now.
Do you know what happened to the big crystal ball?
Yes.
Ivan Boxwell got the ball from the Mathixes and had planned to use it in the Kiva Temple.
So at that time, that was during a little bit after the war times, and some of the little crystals had come off of the ball, and Ivan couldn't find anyone to replace them. So he put it in storage.
Years later, some of the younger Shriners were cleaning out the attic and, not knowing the importance of the ball, threw it into the dumpster and it shattered into pieces.
It was a shame that that happened.
Was it really as big as they said?
Yes, it was a huge ball, beautiful ball.
In 1939, I believe it was, I was in high school, and there was a band leader, Lloyd Snyder, had a band out at the Nat, and he needed a saxophone player, and he had heard that I might be able to play with him. So he had me come out, and I sat in with the band, and he hired me. I was making $25 a week with the band. That wasn't too bad at that time. And that's what I made with Lloyd Snyder, $25 a week.
Especially for a 16-year-old. You were 16 years old.
That's pretty good money.
You also played with Tommy Dorsey?
Yes, I played with Tommy Dorsey about 3 years. Of all the bands I played with, I probably, he was the toughest taskmaster of any of them. He's a real perfectionist.
The Nat was also on the big band circuit. Big bands would travel Route 66 and stop and play at night here.
Some of these bands were celebrities. These were entertainers that they heard over the radio. Occasionally, some of them did buy records from these people, though not as many. And then maybe their parents had these records. And so these were bands that people knew of, the Dorsey brothers and others like this, and so they'd heard them. And when they came to Amarillo, it was an exciting time. Let's go listen to somebody who's a celebrity. a musician that we know, that we've heard of.
I do remember when the really big bands would come to town, they normally would have a concert down at the auditorium, and then they would play at the Nat. And we were all so awestruck with the big bands that we really wouldn't even dance to them. We'd just stand by the stage and watch.
Erskine Hawkins was one of my favorite ones. He came through, and of course
Really?
Jan Garber came here 2 or 3 times. And Kay Kaiser.
Kay Kaiser came through here. Duke Ellington came through here.
There were some really gigantic talents that kind of marched in front of that movement, like Duke Ellington and Louis Armstrong. I mean, to me, you're really talking giants when you talk about those people.
During the 30s and 40s, there was also a supper club on the 2nd floor. Sunday was another big night at the Nat.
After we got to college, we thought the big, important, fun thing to do then was the Sunday night supper club at the Nat, which was upstairs. And I think that was $2 a person, but you could get a good meal and dance downstairs and really enjoy yourself.
My most enjoyable dancing was done on Sunday night at the supper club. And they had tables upstairs, and you went and you were at your table. That was not a tag dance. You went with your date, you danced, you changed partners, or people would, you know, there were just people at different tables, just like it would be now.
1942 was a big year. America went to war, Dr. Maddox took over the Nat, and somehow nothing was ever the same again.
When I first went to work at the Nat, the business was very good. All they had to do, it seemed like, was just open the doors and have music, and the place would fill up. And it was, the air base was at full size here in Amarillo.
We were very loyal to our school and loyal to our country, and our men, our boys were all on the side of right. They were going to make things good for the world, and they did. We were a nation of winners and heroes.
And Americans had to do without certain things. Young women had to do without nylons. You know, nylon hose had just come in. It replaced rayon, which had replaced cotton. And there was this feeling of, well, you know, we are sacrificing some from the war effort.
My friend's older sisters used leg makeup, and to make sure that they looked as much like the real nylons as possible, they used an eyebrow pencil to draw a seam down the back of the leg.
Tell me about the Nat during those war years.
It was a fun time with all of the soldiers. Of course, we were open every night except Sunday night. And of course, the soldiers really did have a good time. They danced themselves to death.
And musicians and that whole life was very strange to me. I was a naive little kid, you know. I saw women smoking, even drinking whiskey, you know, and I had never seen that before in my life.
On the band pit behind the music stand, there's a little hole drilled in the floor. The reason for that is we'd go to the bar and get a 7-Up or a Coca-Cola and then pour half of it through that hole, and then fill the rest of it with whiskey or whatever we were drinking and kind of mix it together, you know. And it looked like we were drinking a Coca-Cola, and that was all right with Doc Maddox if we were drinking a Coca-Cola. But that was the purpose of the hole. But every one of us had a hole. I had a hole.
Do you think that when the air base came, that it kind of changed the feeling of the Nat?
Well, yes, I think it changed the feeling of the whole city.
Certainly one of the things World War II did was stir America greatly. You know, we were still, I think, in the Depression, largely homebodies and not a lot of movement. World War II came along, and you end up with 15 million men and women in uniform. You end up with, by most estimates, another 15 million civilians who move to find work. They came to Amarillo to work in the shell loading facility at what is today Pantex. They came to work at the air base, And so I suppose if you went to the Nat in 1944, people no longer would be able to recognize all the people. There would be maybe the same number of young men, but a lot of them wouldn't be from Amarillo.
It was in November of 1941. We were at the supper club at the Nat, Floyd and I and another couple, and all our friends were there. Well, we found out that night that the 36th Division had been recalled, and those guys were leaving the next day.
There were so many boys that were started leaving and going away, and it just, the younger ones coming on didn't have that same enthusiasm, I don't think, for dancing that we did. Plus, the war was coming on, and everybody was under such a strain, and things got immediately so serious.
And then when Pearl Harbor came, that was the beginning of the end, because the guys that would all been friends together, would all went to the Nat together, would all had a great time together. When the war started for us, then it began to change, because so many of us went into service at that time.
Yes, you'd dance with a fellow that would be leaving the next week, or soon anyway, soon after you saw him. And then, of course, a lot of them, when they get leave, they'd come back, and you'd see them out there.
Do you remember anybody who didn't come back?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes.
Several.
I knew several didn't come back.
Well, it became a new crop of folks that came in, the airmen at the
And they
air
sort
base.
of took over the Nat.
They did. They took it over.
It was the air base that took it over after that.
Well, it was kind of the place to go and the thing to do before the war, but after the war, things had changed. Being away 2.5, 3 years, or 4 years, whatever some of us were, to come back, why, many of the girls had married. Many of us had gotten Dear John letters, and it just wasn't the same.
I think in some ways World War II is kind of like the wall from which Humpty Dumpty fell, and all the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put that society back together again. And so the veterans come home and they find things have changed. But I do believe, too, that they had changed.
Nat was kind of like thoughts of home, I think. You know, you kind of connected it with the things that you did in high school, and and it was just a fun time, a carefree time. The last really carefree time that our generation had.
It had to be you. It had to be you.
Really marked the beginning of the end for the Nat is Doc Maddox decided that he wasn't going to have live music anymore. So we went to work one Monday morning, and the doors were locked on us. We couldn't get in. What had happened, he set up a motion picture machine with a large screen that would show a motion picture of a band with a band music. And he was going to use that instead of a live band. And that is really the beginning of the end of the Nat as we know the Nat, or knew the Nat then. Because that didn't go over, it went over like a lead balloon.
I think music changed, too. The era of the big band begins to fade, and in the 50s we begin to see what is called youth music, and some of it was early race music, you know, people like Bo Diddley and Little Richard and Fats Domino, and then followed by Elvis and all the others. And it was different, and older people weren't interested in that kind of music, so you get a youth culture. And a youth culture didn't really lend itself to the kind of music that had been traditionally played at the Nat.
Don't forget that period didn't last but about 15 years, really. The heyday of the big bands. And I came in right at the end of it. Right at the end. It was dying already when...
Does that make you sad?
Yeah, things change.
I think we often tend to look back at these years with a special poignancy, a special nostalgia. This was when going in some ways was easy, it was exciting, filled with potential. You know, everything was still possible.
There's just a feeling that everything was going well. not only for us, but for everybody. And we were in love. And the band played so well.
A lot of us didn't really appreciate till they suddenly closed it down. And then it was a real shock. My goodness, what are we going to do here, you know? No place else to go like this. And so when they closed it down, that was a real shock.
I had a very good friend that died not too long ago, and she said if I could have any wish that I wanted, I would like to go to the Nat one more time and get a rush. And that really is true. That really is true.
boys sang Glenn Miller, Glenn Miller, Glenn Miller went on, and the whole, everybody kept quiet all of a sudden. The whole mess hall was completely and totally quiet, because this was part of our family, part of our family.
It was just such a terrible shock that it was just impossible to absorb.
I cried. I said, what a great loss this is. And the tears came to my eyes. I liked him very much. He just disappeared into the clouds and was never seen again. So whether the Lord took him from the earth to heaven, I don't know. Maybe that's too dramatic. But certainly from the way he lived his life and the kind of family man he was, it wouldn't be too bizarre.
He's a great man, a very, very great man. Part of our American culture that'll never die.